Greetings for Content Evolution New World. Glad to have you with us. Mike McGuire is my co-host on the West Coast. I'm Kevin Clark here on the East Coast. Greetings, Mike.
Good day. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Good. I'm dipping back into so when I was studying communication from a degree program when Marshall McLuhan was right as a theorist up in Canada, and today we're talking about hot and cold media and back. Let me just read a definition of hot and cold media from the point of view of what he meant by media temperature, right? Because he was trying to talk about each media encourages different degrees of participation from the viewer, all right? So hot media is filled with data from high quality sources. It is considered high definition and intensely engages a single sense. Hot media presents complete information and does not leave much to be filled in or completed by the audience. Now, let's compare that to McLuhan's definition of cold media. Cold media provides less data from the viewer. It is considered low definition and loosely engages multiple senses. Cold media presents little information, invites high levels of participation and completion by the audience. So he's talking, without using the language, he's talking a little bit there about Gestalt psychology, where it's incomplete and you're inviting the person to do the completion, right?
Right.
So, that's what he was talking about. Now, interestingly enough, he would have included in hot media in the past film, photography, radio, the telegraph. We don't talk about that anymore. Newspapers, lecture, fiction, and then you're moving toward the center, toward cool, all right? Paper, manuscripts, and the alphabet itself included as cool or cold media, speech, the telephone, seminars, television, and then way out in his cold area was VR and AI, right? So he was beginning to think about those. He also had this notion that in addition to the participation, that as you move across that dimension, that some of these are more disperse data, and as you're moving toward television, the net, VR and AI, it's more, from his point of view, more tribal, mythic, organic, and inclusion, based on inclusion. So I think that there's been some morphing since the time he originally conceived of the model, but it's still an interesting framework, and I thought that we would talk about the fact that there's a lot of more cool media, incomplete, inviting the person in. He didn't have any idea about social media, right? At the time, it's not even on there. And so it's kind of like cool media and cold cash. Where is the money going? Mike, what do you think? And then we're going to open it up for discussion.
Well, yeah, then I think, looking back at those and engaging with McLuhan, I think is particularly interesting in these times. I think, when you look at what's happened, if we were, I think, started this talking about some of the coverage around both the convention and the Olympics, where you see, the data that so far for the Olympics was very successful, especially compared to the Tokyo or the COVID Olympics. But, the engagement of the audience outside of the broadcast channel was pretty fascinating. I think they said they were streaming billions of minutes of viewing video of the event, which is, I think, Tokyo, Australia, Beijing combined. They had, they were streaming much more to devices and kind of on demand kind of experiences. And it would be hard. As insightful as he was, it would be hard to envision what we experience now regularly on a daily basis. But especially during these kind of what we used to call tentpole events in TV, kind of advertising and planning. They still seem to generate some fairly good viewership and numbers, but also I think in terms of broadcast, but it's the online, right, and social that have kind of created these amplifiers, if you will, that I think are kind of the effects on us as humans. I think is McLuhan would have been. I'm not sure if he would have been fascinated or repelled. I'm not sure. I think social media might have been interesting for him to try to
well, remember,
grok. But
McLuhan had another book that he didn't complete. He had another author, right, and discussed tetratic reversals, right, where there was something that was happening in foreground that would get obsoleted and then retrieved, and it would end up being it would have a new life, but it would come back in a different form, right? So I might use an analogy here. For those of you who are familiar with the history of computing, that here is the original computers, which were mainframes, and mainframes get obsoleted by, originally it was called client server, or a diffuse number of personal computers on your desk as opposed to tying into one, and then that becomes connected to a network, and then the net starts to retrieve that connectivity, because the original mainframes, there weren't enough of them, so you had to share them, right? There was
right.
it was all based on timeshare. When could you get a reservation on the computer to use it, right? So it becomes a network effect. And now as computing reinvents itself and you're thinking about quantum computing, there's a retrieval, because that particular type of technology, there isn't enough quantum to go around. So you're back to timeshare, right? So it gets retrieved, right? So, it's like, oh, these things have a tendency to have those kinds of patterns. And, we're right in the middle of AI. And so the question is AI hot or cool? I think that it's, he's got it in the cool because it's very participative. But yet the outputs of what you are creating could become hot media, because what you're using it for is to create something that's durable, all right, or it is authoritative. So it moves from cold to hot, all right. The creation process is cool, and then the usage is hot, right? So anyway, I'm just saying lots of opportunities to to think about the framework. Rob, you were on the call first. I assume that sometimes when people arrive early, it's because they're interested in the topic. What do you think?
I'm deadline driven, Kevin. I'm always on time for things. So that's been
okay.
That's been
so this is
hammered into me.
You're
True.
You're a military. To arrive on time is late, and to arrive early is on time. Good for you.
Right. The last thing you said caught my attention, because I'd like to hear more about your thoughts about why AI would even be part of this conversation, because it's not, AI in and of itself is not media. When I think of media, I think of distribution channels or mechanisms, right? Not the tools to create the media to distribute. So help me understand that a little bit more about looking at AI as a segment of media.
Okay. Well, I don't think that media has to be thought of as distribution.
Okay.
Right? Because telephone is on here, right? And the fact is that's just one-to-one. it's like a fax machine, for those of you who remember those, that it's, and you can think of art as the same thing, that there is, one, work of art, and there's one, viewer, if it's visual, or there's, one performance, and, you're listening to it, right? So the, the notional idea of that the word mass media, the word mass does not have to precede. Media is simply, the multiple form of medium, right? That, and McLuhan wrote about, the medium is the message. He wrote that, in Understanding Media. So I don't think we live, right, in, trying to get to a lot of people in the marketing profession, or, that kind of thing. But it's not necessarily core to communications theory. That's all I'm saying. And the durability, we're beginning to get into, can a person who is in a leadership position or is in a position at a company, for a period of time, once they're gone, their wisdom, their judgment, their, all that is gone. Well, what if that weren't the case? What if, everything that I was doing at the company was observable, could be somehow imprinted into the archives of, how that company, operates, because we have technology to do that now. And now I have, that leader, available, right, for the frame of time that they were leading, available in perpetuity, right? Same way that we talked about digital inheritance, that one generation could pass something more durable down to another generation, not just money, but perhaps, what the ancestors knew, all right, in a more durable way. Don't know. That's what I think that that this is opening up in my mind, are those possibilities. Fair?
Fair, very fair. Thank you for that. Yeah.
We have some other folks on camera. So I see Kyle, I see Doug. Kyle, your microphone's on, so you're first. What is this sparking for you?
I don't know. I don't. The concept of cool and hot media is new to me, and I'm trying to understand it. I'm having ChatGPT help me as well. I feel like the boundaries are being obliterated between media. And if you look at, I don't know if you guys, have you seen Decohere's stations? So Decohere is an image generation tool, and they've got this thing called stations, where you basically, if you see an image you like, you can turn it into a station, and then it just starts cascading an image a second, generating original content with no prompting. So you sit back, you're just passively watching this entertainment as the machine just generates content, right? So is that media? It's not durable, but it could be. You could choose anything that's sort of cascading down and say, oh, that's something I'm going to express and I'm going to share and I'm going to attach my name to. So I kind of feel like we're going to this place where how media is created, who it's created for, who consumes it is just going to be all over the place. Some of it's going to be hyper personalized. It's never going to go beyond that. And then some of that will get curated out and put out in the world, and some of that will turn into things that are more persistent. But it all gets sort of mixed back into this.
Yeah,
like the G in GPT, the generative part of AI is a thing that doesn't feel like the cooler, hot definitions really takes into account.
I absolutely agree with you. And also, when you looked at, McLuhan put film in hot media, right? Well, he's making an assumption, right, that it's the type of film that we would understand as, going to the cinema, probably, all right? And, that has shrunk down to the attention span of TikTok.
Yeah.
Right? And so the question is, right, is that still hot? Okay. And I would, tell you that of those are invitations, for watch this and then put something over here in the chat. Okay. What did you think about this? Right. So that makes it, both hot and cool at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
That, what you're watching is explicit, but it's an invitation to interact and say, well, that was great, or that sucks, or wow, or whatever. Right. This is what you should make next.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I think
Well,
that's why
all social media is participatory media by kind of design, right? So wouldn't that all fall into that cold or cool category?
maybe I would say that the very top producers, right, who actually make a living, right, on social media of some type, the Joe Rogans or the Mr. Beasts, okay, are making something that's explicit, right? It's hot. It probably doesn't fall into the high quality data sources, part of it, that the definition that's probably not there. However, it's specific made in a way to be hot for it to cross over into the cool area for reaction, right? So I think it's a both and so he was making this, you have to put it into a category. No, it's beginning to feel more like a tennis match, that it's going back and forth, right? Yeah. And the minute that you start to, like the category of reaction videos, right? Here's the performance. Look at the performance. It's explicit. It's hot. All right. But then I'm going to react to it. Okay. Look at the facial expression. What did you think? That's a juxtaposition of the two. Right. And frankly, a lot of what we used to think of as news, where we have a panel of people, hey, we just saw this piece of news. What do you think? That's a crossover, right, to to cool, right, on television from, that's theoretically news explicit. I don't know. That's why I thought this was an interesting topic, is that as you were saying, Kyle, it's coming apart. All right. I mean,
it's like my question is like, is generative AI like truly something new, which my instinct that it is, or is it just everything that came before gets sucked into it? and like maybe generative AI in some sense, it almost literally is a black hole that, you've got all this media swirling around it and it's getting sucked into the engines, right? And once it's in the engine, sort of this radiation comes out like a black hole, which is this new form. Some of it looks like what was there before. Some of it looks completely different. Some of it is transient. Some of it is permanent. I don't know. I mean, it feels very different to me. Like, I don't know how to put this conversation in context of generative AI.
Well, just remember, all right, I mean, I'm just going to, Kyle, you're going to be the old guy, get off my lawn, all right, with that language, because, the kids that have this available to them from birth.
Yeah.
Or when you talk to them 20 years from now, right? Oh, this is the new. No, it's not new, right? This is the fabric of reality, all right? That's going to happen. There's no question that that's going to happen. Sure. So we're living in the moment where feels new.
Yeah.
Hey, Doug, your hand's up. Your mic's on. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So some comments I would have is, first of all, I like these charts, which the 4-quadrant charts. I'm struggling with this one because they have high on each end, right? And they have low in the center. So, are they trying to say involvement, high involvement and high participation, but then there's a low part in there, and then there's, I'm still struggling with what hot and cold means, but fragment versus tribal, and trying to think of that. I guess my one comment is they have the word net, which I would assume he's thinking internet.
Yes,
Uh,
that's a placeholder for,
social
networks.
media,
Remember at the time that, he's got a little, you know, forgot what the name of it is, but that it's an incomplete word, right? That it probably is preceding wide adoption of the internet and when this model was first promulgated by
right.
McLuhan. But you saw network effects, all right? And so I'm, assuming that he's imagining, right, what could happen. And he did imagine quite a few things before they came into existence. All
Did
right.
he
So
have VR and AR? AI, excuse me, in what he wrote this is like in 64, is it, or something like that?
yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying is that as a communications theorist, he was well, ahead of what the technology could actually do, but he was imagining, where it
Well,
would.
AI definitely was out. It was in the 60s, but VR, that someone else added that one. Would be my question too. So anyway, bottom line is I put a couple, because when I hear media, I was thinking of social media or media from news reporting kind of things. It's the first thing. Then I think of social media. And then since he did reference AI, then I thought, well, I can think from an AI perspective. A couple comments I would have here is, first of all, telegraph, even radio, newspapers, the print newspapers going away, right? So, like how much do people consume their time? And, though radio, I guess, is still fairly big, but print newspapers really low. People spend most of their time now getting their news and media on the internet. How AI will change that will be interesting. And then this tribalism, I'm concerned about that as well, because, we just reinforce what we want to hear,
Well, I
right?
mean, the fact is that the original Fox News, that model was created by William Randolph Hearst, right, with yellow journalism, getting us into the Spanish-American War, right? If you'd like to see, something that has a point of view but looks like news, right, you can go that far back, right? So
Yeah,
it's not
the
like,
difference
oh,
between
this
news
never
and
happened before.
commentary, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the blurring of church and state, in organizations. Rob, right? You will remember the birth of CNET, right? That just got acquired by Ziff Davis. I remember going in and being briefed by this new entity, CNET, and saying, there is no church and state here, right? You want to be on our programs or in our, media, write a check, and, they were very explicit that, we're for sale, right? And, explicitly so. And it kept, both our advertising buyers and our editorial people away from CNET for quite a while because we couldn't figure out whether we wanted to be associated with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Though I
Other
like
people were desperate to have visibility, and they were kind of like the P.T. Barnum, all publicity is good publicity, even if it's bad, we're in the headlines. So,
Yeah,
but
though I like C-SPAN personally, just in the sense that, we'll let people talk and,
yeah,
you can listen, right? And, that's why I put in the Stephen Kotler article, How to Learn Anything in 5 Not So Easy Steps, which is, his position is, if my position, first of all, get 5 opinions, right? Try to get experts and look for experts who disagree, right? And yeah, you're not an expert in this field, but you're listening to the experts debate, and and the comment is, my position hasn't been thoroughly revised at least once. I still have more work to do into the analysis, and it just goes down to critical thinking. you know, is I'm a big believer in that, is that we need more critical thinking, and you know, and can AI help with that, right? In fact, I had a discussion with AI on mental health, and my discussion was, okay, AI, are you telling me what I need to know or what I want to know? Right? I want to hear what I need to hear or what I want to hear, right? And AI is really good to be very empathetic and telling me, yeah, eat that extra brownie, right? And the good AI would say, no, you know, that extra, you know, your if your goal is to lose 10 pounds, the extra brownie is not going to achieve that goal, right? And so you know, how are we designing the goals of the, you know, of the media, you know, of what we need to hear or what we want to hear? Too often, you know, junk media is telling us what we want to hear, so we keep hearing it more, as opposed to what we need to hear to be more critical thinkers.
And I would further posit, Mike, you know, tell me whether you think this is right, is that wanting to hear something that is congruent with your worldview is what's driving, you know, continued fragmentation.
Yeah, the tribalism.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you're just going into narrower and narrower, you know, if it's social media driven, algorithmic, you know, cul-de-sacs, you know, where, you know, it's all self-referential and so on and so forth, which is, you know, it's interesting, but the ability to get into diverse conversations where you reconnect with, you know, something else that you might want to think about, you know, those invitations are, you know, you don't get that unless you opt into something. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I was thinking, as I was saying, you know, I was kind of thinking, linking back to what Doug was saying and Rob had said earlier, and also Kyle was, you know, to your point, initially, Rob's like, AI, why would that be here? It's a tool. I mean, why would this be considered part of the media? But as I, you know, as the conversation went on, my thought was, you know, to your point, to the point that Kevin was just making, you know, this was said about search, Kevin, right? And filters. 15, 20 years ago, I think it was that guy, Cass Sunstein, you know, wrote the thing called the Daily Me. And we're seeing that now. And I think what was interesting as you were in the whole tie into McLuhan, Kevin, was if you recall what cold media did, you know, it gave us Walter Cronkite, right? Voice of a Nation, you know, Walter's going to reassure us every night.
I think that's hot.
Was that hot? Well,
I think he was explicit. I think that Cronkite was a hot point in a cool media form, right? Because he was a common denominator, in my opinion. But you know,
no, I okay, yes, thank you for correcting that terminology. You're right. Was that as valuable as we thought it was, both to media and society? I don't know how that becomes, you know, that sort of an entity, you know, that can bridge and cross societies, you know, outside of, well, not even politicians, but I mean, you know, I'm not sure. I wonder if that's something that if we look back at the, you know, the four types, right, of media that McLuhan was talking about, does that kind of thing come back, right? Is that something that is retrieved from the past?
I'm thinking that, you know, that the generative AI stuff that we have talked about many, many times since this whole Content Evolution NuWorld thing started, and Content Evolution's collab spun up with Kyle's, you know, leadership as the chief generative officer, that it's interesting that this is a new common denominator that is creating interest in other diverse things, because you know, you don't know what you're going to get when you ask, you know, a question in this space. And I think it's bursting people out of their cul-de-sacs. If you get involved in, you know, generative AI, it is not necessarily giving you, you know, what the algorithm would give you on social media, per se. Now, I'm making an assumption here, but it's a new, you know, like the Walter Cronkite thing. It's a different common denominator, right, for, you know, diverse conversations, and people who otherwise would not have talked to each other are beginning to, you know, interact, in my humble opinion. All right, at least that's observable to me.
Well, and I think we quickly moved from the idea of media consumers to media consumers become media producers, right? That it's a very fluid thing, that I'm consuming media and I'm like, oh, I like Taylor Swift. Let me make a song that sounds just like Taylor Swift because I love Taylor Swift. Like, it just becomes part of the expression that, you know, in the 80s, I would have made a mixtape. Now I'm going to make an original song that is Taylor Swift singing, and I'm going to share that with my friends, right? So it's, you know, that again, that line, I just, all the boundaries are getting obliterated.
Yeah, and it's a continuation of what we've been seeing with social media for the last couple of decades, right? Where again, where instead of just, you know, listening to Walter Cronkite on the news at night, I can create my own blog and publish my own content.
Well, and the DNC for the first time ever, they have a special area for TikTokers, right?
Right.
Like in the hall, right? They've got, you know, CNN and ABC over here, and they got the TikTok, you know, stage over here that's 6 feet from the stage.
Yeah.
Which finally they realized that, because I think for 10 years, isn't that for the last 10 years, haven't the numbers been that people between the ages of 12 and 20 or whatever get all their news through TikTok and social media. And I mean, some of the newscasters, like I think even the old BBC might have, I have to go look that up. They may have a TikTok or they definitely have an Instagram, right? And
what I've heard about the DNC thing is that the old guard media is not treating the TikTok journalists very well, right? They're being dicks about.
Well, yeah, I mean,
well,
I mean, that doesn't surprise me that, you know, that's happening, right? I mean, that's like a fraternity hazing kind of thing.
Exactly.
But however,
to Kyle's point, they're doing it in public, right? When you were a kid reporter, like when I cub reporter when I was, and you had to go deal with the big boys, at least generally it was behind closed doors, right? Or it wasn't, you know, out in front of 100 million viewers. And I think, you know, in the end, you know, at some point, I don't know that those two forces, you know, in a happy world, oh, they all meet in the middle and people adapt, you know, the news world, news gatherers adapt to some of the practices. I don't know about that. I think the current media is in such a perilous position as far as not just business, right? But the last few years, I think, have, you know, people even more cynical, if that was possible, about the media's role and stuff. And it would be nice to think that citizen journalists and like that could happen. We're starting to see, I think, you know, Rob, I don't know if you track some of the guys from all the, not people you and I knew, but people in kind of that second generation of online news reporting have started to kind of like not have to go reattached back to some larger media system. And that's kind of interesting. It's fascinating. It's going to take a long way to play out. Those kind of people, as they kind of move into those, we may find they using AI in new ways that make sense to, you know, the pursuit of gathering news in a at least semi-objective fashion. And I think maybe that's something that I learned at J School 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that, you know, we always used to have, you know, hold that notion of objectivity up kind of, you know, up at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. And I'm not saying that goes away. I'm just saying that our conception of that will change as news gatherers start to use these tools. I don't think just to move more stuff. Go ahead.
I'm going to put an ad for something that you recently booked for us, Mike. We're going to have in early September Jim Louderback with us, all right, who just recently attended the White House Summit, okay, which is new. So the people who are at the DNC right now were some of the people who showed up at this Creator Summit too. And so there's recognition, you know, that this is an important, you know, group of people to pay attention to, that there are more creators, right, on the way. And, you know, let's give them their, you know, place and their due, and, you know, invite them in. So,
well, and maybe that's the the role that Gen AI evolves into from a consumer standpoint is, hey, help me make sense of all this stuff
Right.
that I'm seeing or reading or hearing about, right? It's that the critical thinking tool that you were talking about, Doug, is help me kind of expand the way I can do critical thinking by being able to analyze and process all this information that's out there.
Well, there's also, if you've been paying attention to the, you probably haven't. I'm pathological, but on Twitter, there's this Mr. Strawberry account. It's the account is I Rule the World MO. If you haven't been following it, it's worth paying attention to. It's basically a troll account where it's been hyping up GPT-5 and talking about universal basic income and artificial general intelligence, and it's coming. And they did a Twitter Spaces where these two women showed up that it became immediately apparent, oh, they're bots. But they were having a conversation with these highly intelligent bots. And then now it's been this back and forth of like, are they bots? Are they human? Are they right? Whether or not they're bots or they're human, we are on the cusp of, we potentially have the ability to say, hey, I want my news, to be completely objective, or I want it leaning this direction or that direction, and I want it in the style of a TikToker, and I want the TikToker to look like Mike McGuire, and I want him to sound like Kevin Clark, and just I'm going to get all my news from an agent that I design. And it may be objective, it might be completely skewed, but it's going to be exactly what I want. What happens then when all news is dynamic, or not all, but like there's a whole new channel that's hyper personalized, dynamic, and indistinguishable from a TikToker or the news or whatever.
Well, I think, yeah, to your point, Rob, it's the AI as your taste newsmaker, whatever you want to say. When I want to laugh, send me, get me some stuff from it's from these kinds of content creators, or artists, right? I think it's one of the more negative terms that's come up lately, Rob. I don't know how you feel about it, but when you're called a creative, it's like, oh, give me some creative over there. It's like not everybody's that Tom Cruise character in Thunder Road, whatever it was. Rob, what was that character? Anyhow, that notion of having a tool that I can tune, right, to say, for economic news, I need X and Y. And, it's going to pull 2 hours of, I'm sure this is already being worked on. When I say I need some good updates on the economy, it's going to pull 2 hours of the podcast of, what's his name? Stephen J. Dubner, right, of Freakonomics, synthesize that, highlight that, and, that's going to be my economic news for whatever time period for what I'm doing. And I think there was a precursor to this, Kevin. I have to go back and look back in the 90s or 2000. There was some stuff being done at a couple things that one of the research things I was working on, where the early version of if they'd had AI, Rob, and everybody, it was essentially it was a scaled by color and topic, would have different topics, different regions would have different colors and fonts, meaning if you wanted news from Asia, it was going to be this block over here, and they would be proportional to the type of news that was coming out, literally, because they were getting news feeds. They had news feeds, and you could look at this kind of almost three-dimensional wall, right, of information. And to me, that's probably this interesting kind of physical representation, like what you were kind of describing, where I could just go in and just say, or on the keyboard, news from sub-Saharan Africa, what's new in South America, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how, it's pretty clumsy now, right? When we have to go in and search those individually or even pull feeds from it, and I think that's where is this being recorded, Kevin?
It is.
Oh, good. Because we might have a business plan in here somewhere. That I think that sort of thing becomes, if not, I mean, it's certainly possible now. I just don't know that anybody's created my tunable AI news bot.
Well, there was a time, now I'm going quite a ways back, right, where the amount of information that you could get into your own PC was a relatively thin stream, right? You could not get a lot of information in. And if you were trying to, assemble say a personalized news feed, it was excruciatingly slow, especially if there were pictures or video associated.
Mhm.
So one of the things that was conceived of, we had briefly until the bandwidth picked up, was we had this, tell me what you're interested in, and those interests would create a profile, and you'd have your system log in overnight and for like
Right.
3 hours download stuff, and it would create this little magazine for the morning, right? Of,
Mhm.
Here's the stuff for you, Kevin, right? But it would take that long to download all of the objects that were necessary to make it, right?
Right.
But once it's on your hard drive, you'd be able to see it real time, right? And then it would blow itself up, right? Like erase it to make the next day's, right? So there was a space, for this. This is like a retrieval of that, okay? Except that, you know, um, you don't need to have, there's no time delay now, right? It's like you could express those preferences and do that on demand. You could have AI help you, or, it doesn't necessarily really require AI to do this platform, robotics process automation, standard stuff would be good enough to be able to create this. However, you know, you sky's the limit in terms of that kind of thinking. Um, Bruce, you've been on camera, but we haven't heard your voice today. What do you think?
Well, as usual, Kevin, I just sit and listen. I mean, it's always a graduate class for me. That's the truth. I mean, I just what I have to contribute to what you folks all know is minuscule. I have one observation. You were talking about how things are changing, and we're talking about cold and hot. There's something that got mentioned here in the last couple of days politically, that talked about how the DNC is running, starting their outside of, well, within prime time, but running over.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the observations has been that the DNC doesn't really care, because people are gathering their information in a way that's different than they have gathered before. They don't have to sit and watch the convention. They can see Barack Obama speak at any time they choose. And I think that that's an interesting fact that they have played upon, because I think it's correct. I mean, we don't always have to be there at that moment to watch it in real time. And so the information spreads differently than it has spread in the past. And I thought that was sort of an interesting comment from the DNC as to how and why they were doing that.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, Bruce, I mean, I think that was actually something Kevin and I talked about previously before we kind of came up with this idea for this event. It was interesting. I think our household is small, but it's representative of what you're talking about, right? I have classes on certain nights of the week, right? And I couldn't watch the quote live, mainstream broadcast. My wife she was watching it online. Because I was at this class, I had to come in later on my phone, right, or my computer, and all you had to do was go to YouTube, right? And instead of all the yammering back and forth, I could just watch Obama's speech. I could just watch Michelle. Oh, it's only 12 minutes. Terrific. Yeah. I don't have to listen to the talking heads. Great. It was, and
they'll cut out just the best parts of it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's, Obama's law, that was classic. But that notion of asynchrony, right? I mean, I think that asynchronous consumption rights that started with VHS, recorders and DVRs, etc. But when you see it as any kind of a big quote news event, right? It's part of our, the democratic test. That now, to your point, I don't have to tune in at time. Whereas 20 years ago, we all had to tune in to see who was what the candidate, was going to say, on their party members who were going to speak. You don't have to do that anymore. I can now just go target that. I think that notion now of curation that a YouTube kind of allows, let's face it, it's kind of haphazard. That thing about that notion that we've all talked about before about agents, software agents. I think that's the curator, Kevin, that may not, that may require a little more AI-like capability if I want my personal curator to be able to do that.
Right. And
Surely
Mike,
machine learning can find the stuff, but assemble it a way that Mike would find, lovely. Well, that's probably what my agent's going to do.
Rob?
Well, and that was the big difference with the Olympics broadcast this year too, was that NBC recognized that they no longer can be the gatekeeper of the best events or save them and run them on tape delay in prime time, that they just exposed everything out there, and I could pick and choose whatever events I wanted to watch either in real time or on demand later on. And that made a huge difference in terms of the success of the broadcast that they were kind of given credit for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also want to point out that one of the, you look for innovation, all right. One is that some of the writing that we've seen the last couple of days at the DNC is really quite good. So, the speech writing community is getting, more high quality opportunities to serve, right, than we've seen in recent years. Second is, as an attention hack, I think it's brilliant. All right, I'm trying to eliminate the word "I," so let me rephrase that. It was brilliant that they did the same thing that you do when you have the Parade of Nations for the Olympics, right? And that's to see all the different kinds of athletes, coming by. Adding the DJ to calling, for the votes from the states was a stroke of genius. Okay.
Especially when it's cut against how the Republicans did it. You've got to follow the rules. This is really boring, pursuant to the code of the thing. How many votes? And the DNC's like, whoop, whoop.
Exactly.
It's amazing. I thought that was genius.
It was a beautiful attention hack. All right.
Yeah.
Setting something that was boring to what song do you want to deliver your votes to? It's like, it's going to become a permanent fixture, right? Going forward, and probably for both parties. And I don't know whether I'll like the other playlist, but we'll see. All right.
It's going to be
I'm
a new
registered
job.
independent guy, so I just want to say, I'm an equal opportunity observer, but but that was clearly a win, okay, for for the programming. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, Kevin, you're as an equal opportunity observer. I don't know if you folks are familiar with what Mark Halprin is doing on a program that he's initiated called Two-Way, the number 2, WAY.
No.
Mark is doing something very, very unusual in the sense that he's bringing in people from all over the United States simultaneously on either YouTube or you can sign in and actually participate in the discussion. And he is very, very middle of the road. He's as you just said, he's observational. And he's just, I look at that and I thought, this is kind of breaking the ice here. This is doing something for broadcasting that really hasn't been done before, and it hasn't been done before because the technology wasn't there to provide it. And I look at that and I think that's really brilliant. I mean, he brings people on that, like he brings on Newt Gingrich, he brings on the former ambassador to Germany, he brings on people that really have insights into what they perceive is going on in the political sphere, and it's fascinating. So I mean, it's that neutral observation that I think is critical.
Kyle, question. We know what the format is right now, that something takes place and then you cut to the panel, right? And so the panel is going to talk about what just happened or whatever. how much time is going to pass before one of the panelists is AI?
Well, that's the Mr. Strawberry thing. Like that's the
No, but I'm talking about on CNN or some mainstream media actually puts AI into the mix, into the conversation. Say, oh, what did we just hear? Synthesize that. Give us a summary of what just happened. CNN bot.
I would say my guess is 2 to 3 years, and it will start out labeled like, let's go to our AI bot, right? And it'll say AI generated, can't be trusted, right? It'll have all these labels all over it, right? And then at some point they'll say we've got an AI, stringer, we've got an AI, correspondent, and it'll be really labeled. And then at some point those labels will get smaller and smaller, and I think it will just fade into the fabric. There might be a disclosure, there might not.
I think that the
They'll still need a physical thing.
Yeah, I think the gateway to this, in my humble opinion, are these statistics boards. When they go up and they're predicting, here's what's about to happen in terms of voting, or here's how,
The virtual Steve Kornacki. Yeah, exactly.
I think that is a gateway to those kinds of bots, right? Manifesting and doing explainers, right, on their own, right? So we'll see, right?
Kyle said 2 to 3 years. I would say, I think actually the first insight we'll get to that is one of the anchors will be caught using GPT on their notebook computers at the table, and somebody will call them out. I think that's actually, I would imagine, Rob was doing, it was Doug earlier saying, I was up looking up McLuhan and the 4 types of media online right now, and Kyle said he was using GPT to kind of find out about hot and cold media. I think likely it's going to be one of the anchors, right? Is going to, and I say caught, not like they were doing something wrong, but it wasn't disclosed. As you described.
I don't think that's going to happen on set as much as it's going to happen that the people who are in your IFB, all right, in your ear, have a bunch of stuff going on, and then they're going to feed the wrong thing into your ear, right, into one of the people. Kyle, you had something you wanted to demonstrate, and Doug, you go ahead, you show, and then
I need permission.
You will in a second. Doug, your comment, then Kyle's going to do some kind of a demo.
Okay, yeah, just real quick. So in 1952 election is the night that the first UNIVAC computer made a prediction. And it was the UNIVAC actually had earlier in the night, it was a blowout for Eisenhower. And they didn't actually, they said, okay, we're going to not announce that because it was going to be such a blowout. And then only later when it was a blowout, they said, yeah, the computer was predicting that.
Just remember, the computer was just processing some human data faster. So I don't think UNIVAC actually did yes. So it was just accelerating what we were doing, with exit polling and other data sources, just like we accelerated, being able to process the census or handling Social Security. That, that stuff's big. It'll help to use automation. Okay, Kyle, demo away.
All right. So what you're looking at here, this is a station in Deco here. I've got a link in the chat to this specific station. If you go look at this station, you'll see the same images, the exact same images that are being created here. The way you generate one of these, so you can share them, which is kind of cool. But if you go to the Explore tab of Deco here, so we're at decohere.ai/explore. And so what we're looking at here is a series of stations being sort of mixed together. But I can, if I see an image here that I like, let's see, I kind of like this video. Well, actually, this girl's kind of interesting. So I can click on that image. I can upscale it. I can turn it into a movie, but I can also do this thing called Create Station, where it's going to take this image and the seed prompt beneath it, and it's going to generate a new station. I tried to do this before and yeah, there it goes. And so now I can copy this and I can share that with you. And again, we'll all be looking at the same images, right?
That's got a Billie Eilish vibe going on here.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. I can take any one of these and I can say, let's turn that into a movie. If I've got a subscription, or let's upscale that. But anyway, like what I find fascinating about this is, for months and a year or so, everyone's been talking about prompt engineering, how important it is to understand prompting. Well, you don't need to understand prompting here. This is essentially a passive media experience that at any point I can dive in and curate and say, "Ooh, I want to make my own art out of that," or "I want to make my own station," or "I want to, dig deeper." So that again, for me, it's the fluidity of flipping from consumer to producer is going to be incredibly fluid moving forward.
Okay, so I have two questions. So this is a channel. How did the channel get started? Did you start it? Did somebody else, create? This is what I want to see. Where does the channel come from?
You can do them from. So if you just go here, this is other people creating images, and I can just grab any one of these and I can turn it into a station. I can also, go in and create an image and turn that into a station, right? So you can, let's see, random prompt. So this is the sort of real-time. There's Arnold Schwarzenegger as Superman. So I can say, okay, I like that image. I can turn that into a station. Again, I have to be a paid subscriber to do that. But so you can do either. You can start with someone else's stuff, or you can create your own original thing and create a station from that.
Okay, so you can explore the stations and either tune into one that you want, or say, I want to,
yeah,
bring one into existence. Okay.
What you're effectively doing here is you're just kind of surfing the latent space. It's just sort of these are all original images, right? These have never existed before. I'm not having to prompt them into existence. We're getting an original image every second, or whatever the cadence is. And you're just basically able to kind of, surf through what's possible. And at any point,
so my second observation, given what we know about the, cost of computing for generative AI right now, isn't this an incredibly wasteful, right, application of the tech, right? To just have it, randomly generating this stuff. That how could the decohere become a profitable entity, given what it's doing right now? I'm just curious what you think about the business model behind this.
Well, I don't know their business model. I mean, I could imagine. I mean, imagine going into a doctor's office and having LED panels, and they had different kinds of artwork just flowing, and at any point you could QR code it, and it would bring it up on your phone. Like, I don't know that this is any more wasteful than scrolling through TikTok. Like, I don't understand.
No, I'm just saying that I'm just saying that the, cost per inquiry, has been, clocked at, certain number of.
Well, they're using SDXL. They're using an incredibly efficient thing here. The other thing they're doing.
Okay, well, that's a good thing to know.
The other thing that they're doing is, when I create a station, if I give you the address for this station, or that fish one that I did before, the fact that we're all seeing the same images means not everyone's doing an original version of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
We're at the top of the hour. So those of you who are having to drop off, thank you for being with us. And Kyle, thank you for sharing that. And he dropped
already.
Right. So Mike, thank you for the call today. Interesting topic.
Me too.
Any closing comments before we wrap?
No, other than I think there's something there with the AI, tastemaker for me concept. So I think I'll be working on a GPT for that. We can turn it into a product. Well, thanks for being on this episode. Looking forward to having you with us next week. And again, we've got
couple of interesting folks coming up. We've got Jim Lutterback about creator economy, who was just at the White House, and we've got Joachim Wirtz, all right, from the University of Singapore. That's going to require us to be on a different time zone. So just be aware that call will not be, it's the middle of September at this time. It'll be late in the day so that it'll be the morning for Joachim. All right. So if you're East Coast, it's probably going to be 8 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock Pacific. So with that, thanks for being with us, and everything you do, be intentional. Cheers.
Thank you. You
Take
guys
care.
are just wonderful. Thank you.